Welcome, everybody, to the Three Nails Information Security LinkedIn podcast. I am Vincent Menz, CEO of Three Nails InfoSec, joined today by the amazing and wonderful gentleman, Gary Reimer. Gary is such a special person and very talented at what he does. I've had the pleasure of knowing Gary for all of a month, but I've now learned so much about him, including his passion and zeal for things like governance, risk, and compliance, as well as training, as well as what I find the most interesting thing about him is his piano skills. He's an expert at piano, and if you've ever been to a conference, pretty much anywhere, and you hear a piano playing, it is very likely that that could be Gary. So, Gary, thank you for joining today's live.
I'm really glad I'm here.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Well, today I invited Gary on to speak to us a bit about some things that we found some common interest and common ground on and feel needs to be discussed more, which is training and the importance of training well, training with a plan. And yeah, I'd love to hear more about your thoughts behind that, Gary. Maybe start us off with a little bit about what you think about cybersecurity training.
Well, I'm actually going to back up a little bit because if your audience is going to wonder, like, okay, he wants to talk to us about training, who is he? How come he would talk to us about training? And you mentioned piano, so I'm going to actually just go through the career progression a little bit, and that'll make more sense by the time we're done.
Thank you.
So, started as a concert pianist when I was a teenager and realized I needed something more stable financially for a career. So I went into television production. God only knows what I was thinking. But television production, living in the Detroit area, is corporate education, working for the major companies like GM, Ford, Chrysler, the drug companies, and so on. And so I spent a dozen years working for the Fortune 50 doing corporate teleproduction and training development and training program creation. Because of when I did that, there was a lot of time spent teaching people computers. And I decided that I could do better in life doing computers instead of just doing training. And so I switched. And after a dozen years of that, I realized cyber would be a better fit for me. So that's how I've been doing that for the past decade. So that helps people understand why I can talk about training, because I've trained people from CEOs to janitors to line workers and everybody in the middle. And, because of my current role, I actually sometimes get to brief generals and SESs, but I'm still outranked by the lowest of the military because I'm a contractor. So it's that kind of thing. So you asked about cybersecurity training. Cybersecurity training is really important, but a lot of times what I see happen is it's set up as gotchas. For example, phishing tests. Phishing tests are gotchas. It's like, oh, did you do it right? Did you do it wrong? Gotcha. And there's usually not a reward for doing it right. It could be more gamified. If you could actually reward people for both ends of it, that would be helpful. That's just one example. Instead of me just prattling on, why don't you ask some more specific questions so I can make sure that I answer what you really want to know? Because I understand we are somewhat time limited at your end, so I want to respect that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think one thing I want to touch on initially is what we've had in our private discussion. Something that really struck me is this phrase that you use, keeping the free world free. And, as you described it to me, and I'd love for you to expound on what it means in more detail, but sort of this idea that the more effort you give to training and effort in securing a company or an organization or government, the higher likelihood that the people who are being protected by those groups are not having their data exposed, not being threatened by attackers kind of wanting to be malicious and things like that. Can you give us more information about that phrase you like to use, it seems?
Sure. So when I talk about keeping the free world free, right now I can't talk about the specific systems I assess, but what I'm doing is I'm making sure that the federal government can keep their data private in the places that they need to. And if that data is not private, it actually puts everybody in the country at risk. In fact, it could be stated that at some level, if the US isn't safe from cybersecurity attacks from malign actors, then the rest of the world isn't safe, because if you can't believe what's going on, you're running into problems. And so training, I hit on my phishing bugaboo with that one, but by helping keep every US government system that I do secure, I'm helping keep the free world free. That's where that phrase comes from. And it's, I mean, even though it's fun doing the piano, I feel like this is more of a calling. I can have a broader impact here. Um, right now, there's a lot of people that kind of scare me because they haven't ever met a conspiracy theory they don't like. And that isn't meant to be a political statement, even though some people may take it that way. Being able to train people to spot deep fakes, that helps you realize, oh, that's propaganda. When you hear something wrong, you hear something that's odd, you hear something that's off, something that's inflammatory, being able to go research it out of band to make sure that they're not just trying to get you to clickbait, all of that is training to help the world be safer. Training the workers in the workplace to be able to know what's safe to do and what's not safe to do. I mean, a previous employer, I had this one receptionist, and she never met a conspiracy theory she didn't like, and she never met a link she didn't like, and she'd click on all of them. Every email, every spam, and she'd click on it. No, it was crazy. And I wanted to say to her, I said, please think about that. Nobody sent you, a $10,000 gift certificate to Best Buy on your work email that they shouldn't even know who you are.
Mm.
Stop doing that,
Mm-hmm.
And so she was an interesting piece of work. And that's the most polite 4-letter word. But no, she's she's actually a delightful person, but she was definitely a training challenge. And not everybody succeeds 100% of the time, and she's actually one of mine. I tried.
Mm. Why don't you actually highlight a little bit more about? Oh,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Gary. Finish your thought there.
No, and it's just like no one's 100% successful, and I've got a good hit rate, but she wasn't part of it. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, bringing up sort of individuals who are having a hard time training. Like it's these people are continuously failing at their training, their engagements. How do companies deal with people like that? How do you deal with people like that as you're training them?
Well, sometimes you deal with it with a technology solution instead of a training solution. Are you familiar with Ira Winkler's book, You Can Stop Stupid?
Not in outside of our private conversation. Yeah, no,
Well,
go ahead. Tell us
so
about it.
so what Ira, and he talks about this at conferences, and he's definitely somebody who I respect significantly. He, I don't want to use a different term, but I have great respect for him. And he used to work for one of the 3-letter agencies. And his perspective, if I understand it correctly, is nobody should be able to click on a link and knock down your organization. If you do, your infrastructure is wrong. So in a case for this particular receptionist, what we could have done, if I would have gotten a budget to do it, is put her email, you make her access through a web browser, and then make that web browser connect through a desktop as a service like Authenticate Silo. So she could click on the link all day, all long, if she wanted to, and it wasn't going to do any damage to her local computer, and it wasn't going to infest other computers around her.
Mm.
And so that would be a technology solution. What you can sometimes do is you can retask people. If they're impossible to train to do something, you retask them. And after all, if you put a fish in school, and I don't mean a school of fish, but if you put a fish in school and you made the criteria, how good can you climb a pole, the fish is going to flunk. But if you want to have a fish be responsible for swimming, then the fish is going to excel. So at that point, you retask an employee if they're absolutely not capable of being trained, or figure out a way to put compensating controls around them so they are, protected from being able to damage the organization. Bear in mind that you also have to look at a point of diminishing returns, because you don't want to spend so much money solving for this one problem that you've wasted a lot of your budget just so you can keep this one person employed. If some people just don't belong in some jobs.
Sure. Yeah, I've run into organizations, especially in phishing engagements, phishing, where it's the same problem people each year, and that's difficult. It's difficult for the organization to deal with. I love this concept that you're bringing, though. That's if you can't fix the human, like bring technology into the equation and fix it via technology. Ultimately, I think that's a lot easier said than done.
Oh yeah, there's a
Yeah,
budget.
yes, that and your admins may not have the right training on the tools they're supposed to implement, EDRs and firewalls, segregation and all the things. So it leaves a lot to be needed in a network as far as training goes. Um,
Well, and that brings me around to another type of training that I think, because we're talking to an audience who has to implement this training, but a lot of the times, I've been around and I see people make the same mistakes over and over and over again. And I kind of sort of wish that there were people who are out there just training the basics just to make sure they get it. Now, as a security control assessor, I do that. In fact, at one particular agency I worked at 4 or 5 ago, I had this one group that was so purposely choosing. They said, "I'm the government, you're a contractor. I don't have to do what you want us to do." Horrible
mm,
attitude.
mm.
And they didn't want to do things almost to spite. I actually bought the URL cyberpottytraining.com. Yeah, I know. And I finally, I think you know Josh Linkner, not Josh Linkner, Josh Marpet. I've actually convinced him to put something up on it. I'm going to be giving it to him because he will definitely help. I think that there's a real need for basics training out there.
Mm. Give us some headlines of the basics training you're referring to. What are some of the basics you think organizations should go for first?
Well, wait a minute. Let me ask you. Let me ask you a question about your question. Are you talking about the basics that should be trained to people in our roles who are securing systems, or are you talking about basics that should be trained to the staff that they support? Because it's two different audiences and it's two different training, and
Yes.
you need to understand your audience before you can train them.
I'll answer your question with one more question. Do you feel
Sure.
like it's important to train your network admins or your employees first? Because I think that would answer my question for you is, where should your
There's there's
resources?
no, there's no first. There's both and. If I have to pick first,
Yep.
I'm going to split the baby a little bit. I'm going to put some basic training in place for the line staff, and I'm going to make sure that my network admins are trained. Now, if I can hire well trained admins, that's better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's better to hire smart people and ask them what to do versus hiring people who aren't so smart and then telling them what to do.
Sure.
You run a pen test organization, and I've always had the idea that it'd be really good if a pen test organization, because I'm assuming that you see the same things over and over again, and not only that, but you see them from year to year. The
Yep.
running joke is that my report, all I had to do is change the date because they didn't do anything. Is that really a thing?
Uh, it
I'm
is
sure
a
you.
thing. It is a thing.
It may not be a thing for your company if you do a really good job, but it is a thing.
It is
So
a yeah.
wouldn't it be great if there was some education out there convincing people, maybe there is and I'm just not exposed to it, convincing people to do the basics.
Yep.
One question that I get, one thing being in a GRC, GRC role is, have you
Mhm.
ever heard the saw compliance is not security?
Yes.
Yeah, it's true, but have you ever heard the saying, the customer's always right?
Oh yeah. Right. Right.
That's not the whole saying. The customer is always right in matters of taste. And the reason to say the whole saying is, one, customer service people realize that I don't think they should be abused.
Mm-hmm.
And two, there's the whole saying around compliance is security isn't the whole saying. Compliance isn't security, but lack of compliance guarantees lack of security. That's the whole saying.
Huh.
If
Okay.
you don't get compliance straight and you don't get all the basics in place, you're guaranteed to be insecure.
That's a very interesting concept. I'm actually interested in hearing a little bit more on that specifically because I feel like the sort of opposite that I hear often, more often, is that even companies, and maybe it's just because I've seen companies who try to comply, and on paper they're compliant, but in their network, it's like how effective are these policies if like it really doesn't genuinely secure your network? Because I feel like compliance is fundamentally there so that their network and their organization becomes more secure, but maybe it's just a misimplemented policy or something. I feel like compliance is ineffective a lot of times, at least from my perspective as a tester. Um,
Okay, and that's fair. So the question is, are your people going for the spirit or the letter of the law? If you have a company that has to deploy a particular firewall,
mhm.
and they throw it in a rack and they throw power in it and they hook nothing to it, they've deployed a firewall. They have checked that box. If you want to look at compliance as a checkbox kind of thing, like, oh, we did the thing and we didn't look at how it was supposed to impact security, so we didn't do the thing right, but we did the thing, so we can say we checked the box. Yeah, then of course people who are attacking their systems are going to have a field day because they're going to get in. But if you look at it more gestalt and you look at a policy and the policy says X, and you look at it from we're professionals, so we should be able to do this. You look at it and say, okay, this policy says X. They're trying to accomplish Y. Why? I'm not sure, but I need to go research. And so, based on that, I'm going to have to do X, but I'm going to do it in Z fashion to make sure that I actually get the effect that the policy was going for.
Mm,
And bear in mind that, like I said, compliance isn't the be all end all. It isn't. And I agree completely with the first half of the statement.
mhm.
But the people who say, well, compliance is insecurity, so I'm not going to bother with compliance, are shooting themselves in the face.
That's a fair statement. It's interesting you bring up these points. I feel like I often see compliance as viewed as boring, right? I mean, I don't know, boring, maybe ineffective. I had a guest recently, and I can't remember off the top of my head which one, but kind of mentioned that compliance shouldn't be viewed that way. I mean,
I
as
agree
far
with
as
that.
okay, how do you feel like compliance should be viewed? As far as um, yeah, I mean, how do you feel like it should be viewed in general to help companies actually implement it effectively? Maybe care more, before it's too late.
Well, the caring part I can't fix. If somebody's going to job to collect a paycheck, um, and
Yeah.
they don't really care, and they're just doing the bare minimum, then they're doing the bare minimum. They're collecting a paycheck. If you've
Hmm.
got someone who's motivated, they want to understand how to secure the systems.
Hmm.
And so patching is boring,
Hmm.
okay? And we automate as much of it as we can because it's boring. And making sure that the patches are implemented are boring. But if the patches aren't implemented, your life isn't going to be boring for long.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it is, there's some tedium in this field. There's tedium in your field. How many times do you have to hit the same box till you can knock it over? That can be tedious. But if you've got a person who realizes that the pleasure at the end is knowing that it's okay, or knowing that it's as okay as we can make it practically,
Hmm.
then you're the winner. And so you have to have people with the proper mindset.
Hmm.
Now, as far as going beyond that, to how do you help people? If people understand that, then they'll put up with the boring parts. And if you can come up with a novel solution or a compensating control, if you can't implement the control that's requested, and you can be novel, that can be very creative. And
Okay.
so it depends on what your environment is and who your people are.
Mm.
I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure.
Yeah. Can you train this mindset that you're kind of describing? I mean, you were talking about training and kind of are off on a little tangent here, but I'm curious if we could circle it back and kind of encapsulate it together. I mean, how can training improve this process, this mindset? Um, yeah, what type of training could as
How
well?
big of an organization are we talking about? If we're talking about major corporations, like big corporations with big budgets,
Hmm.
then they probably have at least one industrial organizational psychologist on staff.
Okay.
And that person can get behind the motivations of the workers and work on that. If in a smaller organization, you can certainly help people who don't see, you can check people out. You can just ask them. It's like, you understand what you're protecting, you know,
Mm.
Do you understand how important it is? Do you understand? And I'm just using patches because it's an easy horse to beat. But do you understand that if you don't apply these patches, we're insecure and you're going to lose? We're putting a lot more at risk than you might realize. Somebody might
Mhm.
think, I'm just patching a dumb server. Well,
Mhm.
Sony was given a $10 million fix, and they were saying, and at the time they said, why would I spend $10 million to fix a $1 million problem? And
Mhm.
then when it got breached, they found out it was worth a lot more than a $1 million problem. So if you can help people put their eyes on the prize, then maybe you can motivate them to be more effective. And if you really can't motivate them, then there's someone else who will hire them. You don't have to worry about finding a better person, though it is hard because there's not as many of us as we need.
Mm. Yes. It's kind of interesting some of the similarities between compliance and training actually because as I said before, I feel like compliance is often viewed as boring, so is training. Um
Not if
and
it's
and
done well.
and that's what I'm going to speak to here though is
Okay, go ahead.
I one question I asked you, which we brought up training, was what is a common industry held belief that maybe you disagree with, and we came to the topic of training. You saying something along the lines of we're struggling. I feel like as an industry to train, good training isn't popular, isn't common. I mean, maybe give us a description of what training that is not effective looks like today and maybe how we can change and move forward as an industry. And as you asked the question, what size of organizations are we targeting? I want you to speak to mid-size organizations, small to mid, because that's sort of our target audience. As
Sure, that's
even though
fair.
we have large organizations listening in and talking in this discussion, I think really where I want to see benefit is the mid range because those are the higher, like more common targets that we're seeing today.
Well, I started to laugh a little bit when you said, can you give me an example of bad training? Because I'm thinking, do you have a single member of your audience that can't think of examples all on their own? Definitely training is bad, but like the big talking face. I mean, we're talking about good stuff here, but if you just put somebody's big talking face on a screen and just have them go, and this is what you need to do, and this is how you need to do it, that's
Yes.
going to be, yeah, I know you're cringing because it's bringing back bad memories of
Oh yeah.
other training that you've had.
Oh yeah.
Um, so good training is engaging. Good training is right sized. Good
Mm-hmm.
training has built in breaks so people can go do what they need to do instead of feeling locked and chained to their desk. Good training is goes from the mode of threes. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them, and then follow. No, that's it's a real thing. Um, you know, and then after that you need to test the material and you need to help them learn it and go back and do reviews and then make sure that they build that the first training in module 1 builds on the training and helps build the training in module 2, and what's in module 3 relies on a little bit of 1 2 and so on and so forth, so people
Mm-hmm.
can actually make sure that they know that they're acquiring the skills to do the job.
Wonderful answer. How often should organizations train?
It depends on the subject and it depends on the staff. The annual do the hour training a year isn't enough.
Hmm.
It just isn't. I mean, um, in fact, I will tell you in the government, we have that hour a year training that you got to do every year. And what they finally did is they said, okay, we're going to, we know that you all know this, you have this stuff memorized. And so we're going to give you a chance to test out at the training. Take a
Mm-hmm.
test in front. If you answer the questions right, you don't have to take that part of the training. So
Mm-hmm.
people feel rewarded to remember it and deal with it because then they can get out of the training and they can go on to doing other things instead of being stuck plodding through the hour of links.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different ways to construct training.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, you know, one. You talked about challenging industry beliefs. Can I take it off of training for a minute?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure because there's one point I'd like to drive home because especially people in government, but people, a security control assessor is basically a cybersecurity proofreader. And even in non-government organizations, they have people who do my role. And we're the people that stand between the folks that say, yeah, you can run that with, system. Maybe it'd be the CISO, maybe it's a CIO, but we're the interface between them and the different programs. And a lot of people see it as an adversarial thing. And I say, absolutely not. Use me as a budget cudgel. Tell me what's wrong with your system. Help me understand where the bugs are. Help me find the problems. And then I will give you the support to get them fixed, because I'll make sure that your budget people know that we don't let you keep running unless you fix that problem. And so people all of a sudden take me from an adversary to an advocate in a heartbeat. And we're all making the systems more secure as a result of that. So people like me can be leveraged for good from either side.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that people seem to miss a lot.
It reminds me of sort of the methodology we kind of use to engage in what we call purple team engagements. I'm not sure if you're familiar. I'm sure actually you're very familiar.
Yeah, purple team is awesome.
Yeah.
Did you see that? See what? Okay, let me show you what I did. Purple team is awesome.
Yep. And companies, organizations who invite you in to sort of poke holes, kind of like you're speaking to, in sort of their policy procedure. Those are the ones that are like far more secure in my experience, like pen testing them or red teaming them, sitting around a table with these guys and being like, oh, you didn't see that. But next time we come around, they're like on top of it,
Yeah.
So I just think it's.
Yeah. And bear in mind that like making a disaster recovery plan isn't fun, but if you don't have it, you're not going to have it when you need it. And just like insurance, who wants to spend the time and resources on that? Mm-hmm. But it's business enablement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you don't do it and something goes south, then you're done.
Yes.
You can't recover.
Yes.
Or you can recover, but it costs millions more.
Fair enough. Yep. Just so people are aware, I don't think I really talk about a lot of our service offerings on lives because they're all on our website if you're interested. But we offer training, in-person, video training, all the things. We love sitting with companies at a table in person. It's one of our favorite things to do, and sit around a table and do these types of things and brainstorm on the sort of most effective paths of training, and getting your network admins especially caught up to speed, getting your all the security measures implemented and in place in your network, so you can actually have training of like effective forms of training like purple team engagements where you're working together in a collaborative manner. You need things in place to do that type of thing. So Gary, I really appreciate you coming on. I'd hate to put you on the spot, and I don't think I told you I was gonna do it, but I love your humor. And to transition sort of, actually, do you have any closing thoughts before I ask for a joke?
So who told you about joke of the day? Who told you about joke of the day? I always have a joke ready just in case. No, it's just the thing. Well, okay, so let me, my closing, you talk about training. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go way back. My first series, and you're going to think that I'm going way far afield, but trust me, it's worth it. Perfect. My first serious job as an IT director, the people hated the IT director before me, and for good reason. So whenever I would walk in, there'd be a Pavlovian growl because IT guy. So I found out I had a talent for cracking jokes. So I would come in, I'd start working on their computer, I'd crack jokes, they're leaving, or they're laughing, and then when I leave, their computer's working. So it became a joyful experience to see the IT guy. So I was training people to like me, and then found out that it was worth it to have the joke of the day ready. My closing thought is that we can all do as well as we can do. And if we want to do better, we can do better, but we are going to need to make the effort to do it. And there's no problem asking for help from other people to get there.
Mm. That is very insightful.
And I'm really glad that your company offers training as a pen testing company, because this is something I was thinking I would like to see, and it sounds like you're already doing it, which I wasn't aware. So I'm happy to hear that you offer that as a service.
Yes, and the reason being is because in a typical pen test company, you have your guys sort of say, "Hey, we're in your network. we'll do your pen test, throw the report over the fence, catch you next year. That's one of the most frustrating aspects of the people in my industry, as far as penetration testing goes. And as an organization, Three Nails is built around the opposite of that, which is a collaborative effort there to help organizations actually secure themselves and sort of buddy stick with the organizations as long as possible so that we can ensure that they are doing it well and properly and are set to do it by themselves in the future. And then we can kind of let the fish go, and swim in the ocean when it's coddled enough. So yeah, that's definitely our sort of philosophy.
In other words, you're teaching your fish to avoid the nets.
Exactly. Well said.
That's great.
Yes.
Well, because I don't know when this podcast is going to be viewed or by who, I'm going to stick to my normal workplace protocol of never telling a joke that's so interesting I have to repeat it to HR. And yeah, you want to avoid that at all costs. So I'll tell a simple one. What's the difference between a dad joke and a bad joke?
My kids would say nothing.
Well, no, the first letter is different, but other than that, your kids are right. It's exactly the same.
Yes. Well, oh man, that's great. I'm gonna have to tell them that when they might understand it.
How old are your kids? Because I might have a different joke for you.
7 to 2 in that range there.
Okay, so what's the difference between boogers and okra? 5-year-olds don't eat okra.
Yes, they definitely won't, but they will occasionally eat the other thing. So awesome. Okay. Well, thank you, Gary, once again. Appreciate you being on here, and hopefully we'll be able to have you back on. Your wonderful personality and smile. I've really enjoyed this, so thank you very much.
I enjoyed this quite a bit. Thank you for having me.
Yep, and anybody else watching, feel free to inquire. Three Nails. Also, feel free to drop some comments in the chat if you watch the video through. We'd love to hear some of your thoughts, opinions, comments. So thanks again, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Bye now.